Alright, so here's your first example with word problem. If you can't apply it, then you're kind of at a loss, so we need to be able to apply this to real life. 4 friends volunteered to cut the grass around their neighbor's house. Jay cut 23% of the grass, Amy cut 1/5 of the grass, Ken cut 31/100 of the grass, and Bryn cut the rest. What percent of the grass did Bryn cut? First of all, I want to go back to whenever we had fractions, decimals, percents, and we were doing the conversions. You have to make sure that if you're doing anything with a ton of numbers, whether you're ordering them or ranking them or trying to figure out who was the best, who was the worst, they have to look the same. They have to be all fractions with common denominators, or they all have to be decimals, which is my favorite, or they all have to be percents. The question here is, what percent of the grass did Bryn cut? So we should probably change everything to a percent, since we need the percent of Bryn's cut. First, you need to find what percent of the grass Amy and Ken cut. So 1/5 was what Amy cut, and that equals 20%. If you didn't know that, you can do top in, bottom out, move the decimal 2 places to the right. 31/100 was how much grass Ken cut, and you just move the decimal 2 places to the right, so Ken cut 31%. And we already know that Jay cut 23%. So now you're going to take these percents, Jay's, Amy's, Ken's, you're going to put them all together, and then you're going to subtract it from 100. Why 100? 100% means all, total. So if 100% was all of the grass, and Jay, Amy, and Ken cut part of it, we need to take their part out, because whatever's left over is Bryn's cut. So 100% minus Jay's cut, 23, Amy's cut, 20, and Ken's cut, 31. You could have added these up and then subtracted from 100. But when you subtract them from 100, you're left with 26%. So Bryn cut 26% of the grass. Here's another example. Jeremy organizes his movie collection by genre. 2/5 of his collection are dramas. 325 thousandths are action films. 3% are documentaries. 19.5% are comedies. And the rest of his movies are independent films. What percent of his movie collection are independent films? Try this for yourself. Go ahead and press pause. See if you can change everything to percents. Take it from the total, which is 100, and figure out what you're left with for independent films. Alright, so first you're going to find what percent of his films are dramas and actions. Since dramas are currently in a fraction, actions are currently in a decimal, we want everything in percents, so that way we can figure out the percent of independent films. 2/5 is the dramas, and that comes out to 40%. If you did not know that, top in, bottom out. 2 divided by 5 will give you 0.4, 4/10. Move the decimal 2 places to the right. That will give you 40%. 325 thousandths, move the decimal 2 places to the right, and it ends up between the 2 and the 5. So that's 32.5%. Next, you're going to take these percents, all the percents, including the comedies, because remember, comedies and documentaries were already in percents. So you need to take all 4 and subtract those from 100%. So we took 100% minus 40%, which was the dramas, 32.5% the action films, 3% the documentaries, 19.5% comedies. And we are left with 5% out of the total. So that means that 5% of Jeremy's movie collection are independent films. Here's another practice example. This is very important for you to master, so there's going to be more practices in this video. 4 store employees stocked the shelves at the electronics store. Francisco stocked 14% of the shelves. Lauren stocked 3/5 of the shelves. Ling stocked 19/100 of the shelves. And Mark stocked the rest. What percent of the shelves did Mark stock? Again, we need percent, so maybe we should change everything to percent. Since Mark had the leftovers, we need to take those percents and subtract them from the total, which is always 100%. So go ahead and press pause and see if you can get through this problem. Alright, first, find what percent of the shelves Lauren and Ling stocked, because Lauren stocked a fraction of the shelves and Ling stocked a decimal of the shelves. So we're going to need to change all those to percents. Francisco already is in percents. 3/5, top in, bottom out, 3 divided by 5 will give you 6/10. Move the decimal 2 places to the right and you get 60%. 19/100, move the decimal 2 places right and you get 19%. Now you need to subtract all the percents that you know from 100, because 100% is all. And then whatever's left over, that's what belonged to Mark. So 100% minus Francisco's, 14%, minus 60% Lauren's, minus 19% Ling's, and you're left with 7%. So Mark stocked 7% of the shelves. Another example. Joe organizes his CD collection by genre. Half of his collection is rock. 125,000ths is pop. 6% is classical. 9.5% is country. And the rest of his CDs are jazz. What percent of his CD collection is jazz? Well, jazz has the rest of the percent from 100. So we need to change everything to percents, take them from 100, figure out what's left so we know what percent was jazz. Go ahead and press pause and try to get through this problem. Alright. So let's see how you did. Half of his collection is rock. Half is 50%. If you did not know that, top in, bottom out, 1 divided by 2. Move the decimal 2 places right. You get 50%. 125,000ths, move the decimal 2 places right. You end up with 12.5%. That's pop. Take all the percents you know. 50%, 12.5%, 6%, 9.5%, all of those need to be subtracted from 100%, which is what we did here. We're left with 22%, which means 22% of Joe's CD collection is jazz. So, here's another example that we don't have a list. We're not figuring out what's rest, so this is, what the rest is, so this is a little different. The city of Dallas, Texas has a population of approximately 1,189,000 people. The population of the city of Austin, Texas is 55% of the population of Dallas. To the nearest thousand, what is the population of Austin? Now, first of all, I want you to notice that it says to the nearest thousand, not thousandths. So we're not going to have a decimal here. We are going to round to the nearest thousand, which means our ones, tens, and hundreds place should have zeros. We need the population of Texas. So you're going to choose a method. I chose set up a proportion for this. You might choose the method 2, which is writing just straight into an equation. Think, 55 is to 100, because 55 is a percent, and we put percents over 100. 55 is to 100 as what population is to 1,189,000? Because remember, Texas is 55% of the population of Dallas, and the population of Dallas was 1,189,000. So that's why we put the 1,189,000 on the bottom. We're trying to figure out the percent of that. I'm going to set up my proportion. 55 over 100, because it's a percent, equals what population, because I don't know, is to Dallas, 1,189,000. Find the cross products. 55 times 1,189,000 is equal to 100 times P, which gives us 65,395,000 equals 100 times P. In order to get the P by itself, population, you need to do the inverse operation. So we're going to divide both sides by 100. When we do that, we get 653,950. Now please go back to the question. It said to the nearest thousand. So we need to take the 3 to the right is 9. 5 or more, raise the score. So we changed it to 4. 654,000. That would be the population of Austin. When solving a problem with a percent greater than 100, look for the number that will be greater than the number given. You can have more than 100%. It's like when somebody does extra credit and we give you 110%. 100 is the max, but you can get more than the max. So it is possible to have more than 100%. 100% is all. If you have a little bit more than all, that means you have part of another. So let's take a look at that. After a drought, a reservoir had only 66 2/3% of the average amount of water. If the average amount of water is 57 million gallons, how much water was in the reservoir after the drought? Let's go back. We need to know how much water was in the reservoir after the drought. Well, after the drought, it only had 66 2/3% of the average amount. What was the average amount? 57 million. The method I chose for this one is set up an equation. So, remember, of means multiply. Is means equal. I know that the reservoir had only 66 2/3 of 57 million. So I'm looking for the number that is that. What number, W, is 66 2/3% of times 57 million. I'm going to take the 66 2/3 and multiply by 57 million. I keep clicking that, sorry. Here we did 66 2/3. If you remember, changing a percent to a decimal, you move the decimal place 2 to the left. 66 2/3 is the same as 66.666666. So I'm going to take that 66.66666666, repeating. I'm going to move the decimal, because this is a percent, 2 places left, leaving me with 0.66666, repeating, which is 2/3. So that's why in your example here you end up multiplying by 2/3, because it is 2/3. Okay, so you have a fraction times 57 million. What I'm going to end up doing is taking my 2/3 and multiplying by 57 million, but I want to put my 57 million over 1. That way I just multiply straight across. There's no changing the decimals, none of that. Just multiply straight across. So 3 times 1 is 3. 57 million times 2 is 114 million over 3, because 3 times 1 was 3. When you divide that out, you get 38 million. So the reservoir contained 38 million gallons of water after the drought. So here's your check it out. After a drought, a river had only 50 2/3% of the average amount of water flow. If the average amount of water flow is 60 million gallons per day, how much water was flowing in the river after the drought? So I want to know how much water was flowing in the river. Well, the river had only 50 2/3% of the average amount in it, and that average amount was 60 million. So I'm going to set up an equation here. 50 2/3 of the average amount. So what number is 50 2/3 of 60 million? That's what you should be thinking. What number, W, equals 50 2/3% of multiplication 60 million? That's our equation. I need to change that 50 2/3 to a decimal. So here's your check it out. This is the one that I want you to attempt. After a drought, a river had only 50 2/3 of the average amount of water flow. If the average amount of water flow is 60 million gallons per day, how much water was flowing in the river after the drought? The method I want you to use is set up an equation. If you're not comfortable with that, you're more than welcome to do a proportion. But the method I'm going to show is setting up an equation. Go ahead and press pause, and I want you to attempt this problem. Okay, you need to be thinking, What number is 50 2/3% of 60 million? The reason why you think that is because it says a river had only 50 2/3% of the average amount of water flow. Of the average amount of water flow. What was the average amount of water flow? The average amount of water flow is 60 million. So that's why you need to be thinking, what number is 50 2/3 of 60 million? So I set up my equation. Is means equal, of means multiply. I just brought everything down around it. What number equals 50 2/3% times 60 million? The first thing I need to do is change this percent to a decimal. So I have 50 2/3%, which essentially is 50.6 repeating percent, because 2/3 equals 0.6 6/10 repeating. I move the decimal 2 places left, and that means it's 506 thousandths with 6 repeating. No percent, we changed it from percent. So that's what I multiply by. 506 thousandths with 6 repeating times 60 million is 30,400,000.